Hello and welcome to The Struggle Is Not Real. This is our 4th episode already. I got to make sure I'm okay. I actually had the YouTube feed going in my ear. That kind of messed with me a little bit. So this is the podcast that deconstructs popular myths and limiting beliefs that hold entrepreneurs back, replacing them with more empowering perspectives and practical strategies. Each week we tackle a specific misconception, and this week we're going to talk about how comfort is not success. And this is one I'm very excited about because I fall into the comfort trap all the time, and I know how dangerous it is. So here's my little intro perspective. By the way, before I do that, Michael and Kristin, how are you guys doing today?
Great.
I guess I should start there, right? How are you? You're great?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, you're comfortable. We're with New York Times bestselling author Michael Lennington and the queen of coaching, Kristin Tabbert, who, Kristin, I know you're not 100% great, but you're here.
No, I am struggling with kind of that viral thing that the nation's been struggling with, and I finally got hit with it. So
the viral thing that the nation's, is that Elon Musk? What is that?
Could be. No, I mean, like everybody I've talked to has had some form of an upper respiratory sinus, you name it. And I think I got it all. So I am not, a 20-pack a day smoker. I'm just dealing with a head cold right now.
All right. Here's my introduction. Think about the last time you sank into a plush sofa after a long day. That sigh of relief, that centuries of human ambition whispering in your ear, because somewhere along the way we decided success should feel like comfort. But how did we get here? Picture a Puritan farm in 1700s New England. I'm sorry, a Puritan farmer in 1700s New England. To him, success wasn't a velvet armchair. It was frost-resistant wheat and a barn that didn't collapse. Comfort meant his family surviving the winter. His American dream, a community where no one starved. God forbid he built a mansion. They'd accuse him of hubris before they could say fireplace. Then came the tycoons, Carnegie, Rockefeller, men who turned comfort into a spectacle. Marble staircases, private trains, dinners where the napkins cost more than your house. Suddenly, success wasn't just about surviving. It was about flaunting how uncomfortable you could be, how uncomfortable you could make everyone else feel. But the 1950s post-war prosperity sold us the ultimate bait and switch. That white picket fence, it wasn't just wood and paint, it was a promise. Work hard, they said, and you too can have a lawn, a Frigidaire, and a TV dinner tray. Comfort became democratic as long as you could fit the mold. Here's the twist. Today's self-help gurus preach the opposite. Burn the sofa, they cry. Your comfort zone is a lie. We're told success now lives in cold showers, 5 a.m. alarms, and side hustles. Comfort, that's for the weak. Yet, we still cling to our curated Instagram lattes, our Netflix numbness. So which is it? Is comfort the reward for success, or is it its greatest enemy? Maybe both, because history shows we're always renegotiating the deal, clawing towards ease, then ripping it up when it makes us soft. The truth, comfort isn't a destination. It's the weather vane of our ambition, spinning with every generation's hunger. So next time you're cozy under a weighted blanket, ask yourself, am I enjoying my ancestors' wildest dream or procrastinating my own? It's a really good question, actually, Michael.
You're probably doing both.
You could be. I mean, as someone who kind of probably, I think, succumbs to comfort way too much. But I think a lot of people would think that, and there's some ambition and success there too, right? But I feel like I succumb to comfort way too much, and I'm definitely guilty of doing the cold showers and the 5 a.m. wake-up calls and all that stuff too. So, Michael, I know you have a very unique perspective on this thing that I think I've always enjoyed hearing you talk about this topic.
Yeah, I think, when we help people execute more effectively, one of the things you have to sacrifice is your comfort. But I think that if you always sacrifice your comfort, you're going to give up on stuff. If there's never any kind of joy and relaxation and appreciation of life and reflection moments, I think the point of the work is diminished as well. I think comfort and discomfort kind of are two sides of the same coin in many ways.
I like that. All right, let's get into your circle here, your chart. I wish maybe I can put it up on the video for people who are watching our video today. Go ahead and start talking about.
Sure. There's this concept of comfort and growth and panic that I talk about, and it's probably not original with me, but I came up with it, but I'm sure it was developed a million years before I came up with it. But it's kind of like it's concentric circles, and in the inner circle is your comfort zone. It's kind of like the least distance from the center. It's easy to get to. You're comfortable there. You like to stay there. But when you start to grow, when you start to push the boundaries of what you're currently capable of achieving, you move out of the comfort zone into the growth zone, right? So we're learning how to do new things, and we're experimenting with stuff. We stumble, we make mistakes, but as adults, that's how we learn. We make a mistake, we learn what to do differently next time. We try a bunch of different iterations, and eventually we get it right. So that comfort zone is no growth zone, right? But as you move into the growth zone, you start to make progress towards things, and it's uncomfortable, sure, but it's not impossible. But there's a stretch too far, there's a bridge too far as well, where you stretch so far, you enter this panic zone where you don't know what you're doing. There's really a lack of clarity, and you're on the spot to deliver something you are completely incapable of delivering. And I think that's what we call the panic zone, because it's where you freeze, right? It's where your deer in the headlights effect takes over. You stop being effective, and you kind of crash and burn, metaphorically, or in some cases, in reality, if it's a deer in the headlights. So, that kind of willingness to be uncomfortable but not be in panic is kind of a fine line between success and failure, right? But it's getting uncomfortable but not being panic mode, I think, is the sweet spot.
And I love the illustration, because it really illustrates to me that, Kristin, that people kind of in their comfort zone is this very center focused bubble, right? And it's like this bubble that I live in, and people around here where we live in Kentucky, like our neighborhoods are kind of divided up in this bubble, and they don't get out of their bubble very much, and it controls so much of our existence to maintain homeostasis and to just make sure that we know where everything is and how to get there and the way our life flows, and but at the same time, like, that bubble can be a very secure thing, but it can also be something that just really stifles growth.
Yeah, it really can. I mean, I would pose the question, when you bring up very thought-provoking commentary, where do you fall on the spectrum of comfort seeking? Where am I comfortable? Why am I comfortable? And discomfort embracing, questioning, why am I not willing to embrace discomfort or find something outside of my comfort zone? There might be something really great in the next community over, and you're missing opportunities because you're not willing to step outside of that, because you think you have everything that you need right where you're at, and it is good where I'm at.
And Michael, you bring up this whole concept of unconscious. Unconscious is incompetent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you realize that comfort, that homeostasis, feels great. It's exactly where I want to be. And you don't know what you don't know. Like, you don't know how great it is on the other side, or you don't know what happens if you were to grow out of this, whatever else. I mean, I think a lot of times that it even happens. I want to try to be very, well, maybe I won't be politically correct. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I feel like if people who get like stuck on even the welfare trap, right? There's a comfort, what money's coming in, and that welfare trap, and you're almost like stressed that if you grow at all, then that they're going to take that welfare away, right? And now I've got to kind of go out there and earn it, and so how do I? So you get to the point where you maintain homeostasis. Now that's an extreme example. I get that, but that incompetent, unconscious incompetent. Talk about that, and then how you kind of go through those stages of learning, of growing outside of those.
Yeah, because I think it's a model, like they say, all models are wrong, some are useful. I think it's a pretty useful model to think about. And I think what happens like I like to use the example of learning how to drive a car when you were younger, right? When you're 15 years old, and maybe when you're a little kid in the backseat of your car, you had one of those little wheels attached to your car seat, and you could drive the car with mom and dad. You thought it was pretty simple, right? You just turn the wheel and you go where you want to go, and that carries on until you're about 15. And you go to driver's ed, and then you get behind the wheel of a real car. And then all of a sudden you realize really fast that you're not competent. So before you were unconsciously incompetent, you didn't know how to drive, but now you get behind that wheel for the first time and you're really consciously incompetent. Now you don't know how to drive. It's a lot less comfortable. You still aren't any better at driving than you were before, but now you're aware of it. And so that's sort of the second stage of learning. When you're in the first stage, unconscious incompetent, you're not learning. But when you're in the conscious incompetent stage, consciously incompetent, you're in the learning stage. And so as you're getting your license, you're learning how to look both ways, and all that stuff you're supposed to do when you're driving. And those are all forced actions, but eventually you'll get used to it, right? It becomes your routine, it becomes comfortable, and then you move from that consciously incompetent to consciously competent. Once you start to get a little more comfortable, a little more competent, you still have to think about it, right? You're still paying attention. You're not really unconsciously driving your car, but you're better at it. You're not worried when you get behind the wheel. There's no more fear really, but it's still uncomfortable because you have to pay attention, and you're learning, right? But you're competent. And then at some point, you forget how you get to work. You're driving to work, and you get to work, and you don't even remember the drive. You just almost unconsciously you get to work because you know the turns, the stoplights, all the stuff you need to know to get to work, and you just do it almost unconsciously. And when you think back at it, you hardly remember the trip. Autopilot, exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, at that point, you're so comfortable and so competent that you stop learning about driving, right? And so you're comfortable, but you stop learning. So with those unconscious incompetent and unconscious competent stages, which is the fourth stage, those two stages you're not learning. You're unconscious, your mind's disengaged. But in the other two stages, you're growing. And so here's the key. If you really want to be great at something, you've got to get used to staying in that consciously competent stage where you know how to drive, but you're always looking to get better. You're looking. So if you want to be a race car driver, for example, you probably never stop learning how to drive. It's always consciously working on your craft to get better. And you're always a little bit uncomfortable because in that learning phase, you're trying stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't.
And hopefully that thing that you're trying is not, can you eat your dinner and text at the same time while you're driving? That's
exactly. Those are certain competencies you shouldn't pursue.
That's right. That's not what we're going for here. When you overlay the models, though, when you talk about those four stages with, staying in that growth zone, how do you kind of, how do you overlay them so that you don't get to the panic piece? I mean, I think, for example, there's probably more panic early in those learning stages than there are later in those learning stages.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The panic really happens in the second stage, right? Where you don't know what you're doing and you're doing it. But once you know the basics, I think what helps you to stay in that zone, that third zone, if you're asking me, that conscious competent zone, is curiosity about where could I be better at what I do. And driving is an example, but there's probably a better example. You're a realtor.
Sure.
I'm a consultant. Kristin, you're a coach. And we're always looking to get better, right? We're trying to learn how to become a better coach, better consultant, better realtor. And as we learn, we stay in the game. And that's where people get to this point where they become world-class at what they do, right? You stay in that learning zone. You're always experimenting. You're always trying things. You're always reading things. You're looking for new knowledge about how to be even more effective. And the world changes too. The other thing is the world's changing around you. If you stay the way you are now, what you're doing now is going to stop being effective over time. So when people talk about being world-class at anything, that 10,000 hour rule, what that means is they've stayed in that consciously competent stage for their career. They stay there, they learn, they're always getting better.
You earn your, sorry, Mike. You earn your place. You earn your place, right? So, think about basketball. You earn your place to be the starting center, but you don't get to stay there if you don't continue to practice, and that's what happens in business. We earn the right to be at a point in our life where we're comfortable. We've got the house, we've got the bank account, we've got the kids in college, whatever those things may be. And then we sit in that comfort zone. We have arrived and we're not practicing to keep our earned place.
I actually was almost going the other way with it, Kristin, in my mind, was not thinking about the person who's the starting center, but then the player who becomes the coach and how much more you learn about the game when you start to coach it.
Yeah,
right?
It's not just your lane you're paying attention to. You're having to understand all the facets.
So if you're going back to your driver analogy, it's almost like, hey, I'm this, maybe I'm 17, 18 years old. I've been driving for a year and a half, 2 years, and I'm feeling consciously competent. I need to go teach someone else how to drive, and how much you learn about how much deeper your learning gets when you decide that you want to be the one who's teaching someone else.
That is so true. It's like writing a book, because you have to really think through the details of what you're training somebody in. And that's a great learning experience, Mike. It's a great point.
Yeah. Just popped in my head. I mean, sometimes brilliance just happens, I don't know how else to put it. So
this is the great part of having these conversations, because it can bring up different perspectives that comfort is being comfortable with how we think about things, especially in our areas of expertise. We have practiced this over and over and over again. And sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees until somebody brings up a different perspective. And then we can look at it in different ways. And then we can begin to think differently about it and get different results.
Yeah, the nuance and all that stuff is very important. I agree. So let's talk then, Kristin. I know you have some very specific pitfalls when it comes to the comfort success paradigm here. So let's get into some of those pitfalls real quick.
And we've already kind of glossed over some of them, stagnation and missed opportunities. If you're limiting your professional and personal growth, then you're missing chances for development and innovation and opportunities that you'll never immerse yourself in and ever see the outcomes from. If you are a leader, leaders who stay in their comfort zone reduce the ability to challenge the status quo. They miss opportunities to help their team members recognize potentials, helping them get outside of their comfort zone.
Before we go through these too fast, because I don't want to gloss over these, like you just said a little bit, but let's go back to that first one, the stagnation and missed opportunities one, because I think this is one that I know, especially from organizations, there's a lot of impact here. Okay. So for example, I know from some organizations that I've been a part of, they would put on these annual events. They put on the same annual event year after year after year. They never really learn from the annual event. They get stale. They become less effective. And then it was almost like when COVID happened and they were forced to think about the events differently. It opened up the possibilities of what, reimagining these events could actually look like.
Right. It actually opens up, innovation, opportunities. You're missing opportunities for skill development.
But the innovation was for sure a big one there too. But you're right, because from the skill development side, how many people gets the big one right now, maybe being AI, right? I've never had to use that at all for my work, and now here it is.
It's changing faster than we can even stay up with the latest changes. I mean, there's 5 changes when we've just heard about one. So if we stay in our comfort zone and we're not looking outside of that comfort zone, AI is going to change the landscape of how we do business infinitely. And if you just stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to be able to adapt to those changes, and you are going to be left in the dust.
And I even look at it from the standpoint of your skill development. If you're looking for, obviously we have almost every bit of knowledge at our fingertips now, right? And we even have these tools that can help us go deeper with some of that knowledge, or even how to implement some of that knowledge. If you're not bringing your own actual intelligence, as a phrase that I heard for the AI, and problem solving and interpretation, and how to actually take this from a conceptual to a in practice kind of mentality, that's when you're in danger, And so how do you you got to embrace these tools that are going to be here too. You can't just pretend like they're going to go away. This is not a trend. This is not a fad.
So I started to talk to you about diminished leadership effectiveness with the stagnation, but we lost Michael.
That's okay. We'll go.
I think we'll keep going. With that stagnation piece, yes, it can create, from a leadership perspective, diminished effectiveness. It can stunt personal growth as an individual. But I think where that stagnation and those missed opportunities probably have the greatest impact is on the psychological side. Decreased motivation, drives to achieve goals, reduced resilience in facing challenges, false senses of security that can really, I mean, COVID is a good example. Again, a lot of us were in positions where we thought, you know, we were fat, dumb, and happy. And COVID made us realize that we no longer had the securities we thought we had. So, you know, stagnation is really dangerous. Okay.
Did we get an update from Michael? Is that what was going on?
Yes, he said, "Can you let him back in the studio?"
He's not in the studio. So
you're not in the studio, Michael.
We'll have to get it. We'll have to figure it out. So, yeah, all that stuff is extremely fascinating. I think you're right on it. The lack of innovation, the leadership's getting stuck in the same way of how it's always done. That is probably the one thing. Like this is how we've always done it. Probably the biggest trap, I think, to comfort zone thinking, and which limits innovation inside organizations, and it's huge.
How did that work out for Sears and Gamble's? I'm going to say a store name that nobody probably even remembers. You know, they were the biggest retailers in history at the time, and they were not willing to change. What we've always done has always worked, and we are comfortable, and our bottom line is comfortable, and they are stores that are no longer in existence today.
And I think that when I really think about, and I don't know if you want to go deeper on your list, or is there any other ones that you really want to kind of point out here?
No, I had broken them out in a lot of different ways, but I think it all comes down to stagnation and the psychological impacts. I mean, the negative outcomes from all that is missed opportunities, it's decreased skill sets, it's career limitations. How are you limiting your careers? So, I mean, and I think it can really feed into comfort and stagnation can feed into procrastination and hesitation in decision making. And, you know, as Michael pointed out when he was talking about those 4 stages of learning, you know, if you get to the 4th level, the unconscious competency, and you're just sitting there, I can't help think that procrastination and hesitation is going to be the thing that really creates the you're not stasis, you're actually declining.
Yeah, you're to go back to the, you know, I love the Shawshank Redemption. You know, you're going to get busy living, or you're going to get busy dying, right? And the second you decide that you're going to stagnate, you're dying. You're not. And I love the visual that I learned from Brian Buffini, the visual of the Sea of Galilee and how it's got things flowing in, new stuff is flowing in, the old stuff's flowing out, and eventually goes down the Jordan, I guess. I think it's the Jordan to the Dead Sea, where there's nothing flowing out, and it just stagnates. And then when it stagnates, it becomes something that's not viable anymore, right? It smells bad. Have you ever been to the Salt Lake, the Great Salt Lake? That smells terrible. And it's one of those things where it's like we got to constantly be bringing fresh stuff in, and making sure that we're challenging that perspective and that growth mindset of always be growing. And I bet you there's some science behind even your longevity being tied to the ability to always try to keep growing.
Oh, there absolutely is. And if anybody's interested, I have all kinds of research I can point them to in that direction.
Michael, when it comes to short cycle execution and this mentality, we go through these short cycle goals. We're treating our execution periods as standalone periods, right? And we're trying to either gamify it and almost, can I be more effective and efficient in this cycle than I was the last cycle and push that result even more? Or can I create and grow my capacity so that I can kind of like level up? Talk about how those things kind of help keep us in that growth zone and always sustaining towards growth and slightly uncomfortable, probably.
Yeah, so we talk about having people have stretch visions that scare them, right? So that it's a big enough vision, you don't know how to currently do that. But when we set shorter term goals, 12-week goals, 4-week goals, we're not going to set goals that are so big that they feel impossible to us, because in the short term, we want to set goals that are stretches, but they're realistic stretches. And that, in other words, they're going to cause us to do things differently, do different things, but they're not going to be so far out there that we fall into that panic zone we were talking about earlier. So that's where we start with that. We start with stretch goals that represent growth, but they don't represent panic. And then as you execute those tactics in your plan to achieve those goals, you're always learning, right? So that it allows you to get better in the work. You're not just shooting for this goal to represent a better outcome. You're also, as you execute those tactics, you're learning, how well do I execute those tactics? Am I doing them as often as I should be doing them? Are they delivering the way I thought they would? Do I need to learn something different so that I can take better actions, right? So we're engaging with this stretch goal, but we're also in the work itself, we're getting better, because the work is something that, maybe if it's a stretch goal, it's going to be a little bit new to us. So we're learning in the work as well as, getting better in the work as well as hitting bigger goals. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. And Kristin, kind of go back to you real quick. I heard Ed Milet talk about this recently, and I know it's in his book, The Power of One More, which I read a couple years ago. When I was in Italy, when I was in Rome, it's when you're talking about growing and being out of the comfort zone, if you're actually in the location that you want to grow to, I think that actually probably helps a little bit, because this topic has been heavy on my head all day long. And in Ed Milet's analogy, he talks about being the thermostat, and like the thermostat is set to our comfort zone. Like if it's set to 72, and I'm sure that you've coached people, and really the whole idea behind short cycle execution is to take one area of your life and let's turn up the heat a little bit. And let's take some massive action in that area, right? So that's the whole point of a short cycle execution. But eventually, if they don't actually grow themselves outside of where they think they should be, they're going to default back and say, "Oh, this growth was awesome," but it's going to kick right back to where that homeostasis point is.
It will, because it's not always easy, and it requires intentionality. It requires effort. It requires us to do things that we are, I hate to use the word comfortable with, but we have a skill set that we are comfortable in, and to go do something outside of our comfort zone, or to push a little harder on something that we're not what we may feel good at, we like to show up good and well for everyone. And if we do something and we don't look so great, and we maybe even fail at it, that's scary. It's terrifying. But those failures are what causes us to grow in exponential ways.
But I think I'm even talking more so, and Michael, if you want to chime in, to use another phrase we learned during COVID, the new normal. Like, we don't embrace this growth as our new normal point. Then when we take our eye off the prize of a little bit of that, like we don't establish that as our new comfort zone point, then we revert back to the old comfort zone point, right? So if I'm in real estate and I'm like, okay, we need to have a great second half of the year. The first half of the year wasn't very strong, and I need to go out there and do $10 million worth of deals in this last 12 weeks of the year. If I don't set that as my new normal point or my new homeostasis point, and I don't feel like I'm worthy personally to be at that level, sustainably at that level, then if I then set a different 12-week goal that's not based off production, more than likely that production number is going to go right back to where I was even before I set that 12-week year. Do you see that a lot? Am I making sense?
You're talking to Kristin, or are you talking to me?
Either one of you all can go ahead. Michael, I mean, you've got some experience with this.
No, actually, I think Kristin, you wanted to. I was reading you correctly, or do you want me to jump in? I know this is one of the.
Go ahead and jump in, and then I'll add to it.
Yeah. So, becoming comfortable if you stretch the boundaries and you all of a sudden become comfortable at that new level, that's pretty easy. But it's when that discomfort of doing that extra work is so high that you decide you're just going to go back to what you were doing. Because we see people do that all the time, Mike, where they have a breakthrough 12 weeks, or they have a breakthrough, execution cycle. And then, I did that, and take the foot off the gas, and they go right back to where they were, right? Because they haven't assimilated the growth. And that relates to another topic. I don't want to change the topic right now, but I want to come back to this concept of rest run cycles, because I think it's important we talk about that as well. Because we're not talking about, flat out 100% of the time, with your hands on the steering wheel, your eyes closed because you're just going, right. I think there's a natural cycle for us as human beings, and I think rest run is one of those. But I want to wait on that. But I do want to come back to rest run when we get a chance.
I think it's actually applicable here, Michael, just because in that rest run cycle, where if we run and we don't purposely set our thermostat to be what that new normal is, then after that rest period, we're going to revert back to what we're used to, right. So I think it's applicable. Kristin, will you add anything?
I think it goes along with being realistic in what you're doing too. We can't just decide to run the Boston Marathon today when we haven't even jogged down the driveway in 20 years.
Sure.
So setting growth targets in ways that are realistic and achievable in where we're at right now, I think is critical. And self-reflection in that. What dreams, what visions have I been putting off because I'm comfortable where I'm at? If I never do those things, it's okay, because I like where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about that, I think, at length. Like, if there's not a big enough pain to really cause someone to take the massive action and make the change, they're usually interested, but they're not as committed, to use another term that we or not term, but idea that we talk about quite a bit, being interested versus being committed. The pain usually drives the commitment level, right? And so when you're just interested, it's like, I think about me and my weight, right? It sounds great for me to be at a lower weight, but I didn't really get serious about some weight loss until it was uncomfortable for me to tie my shoes. Okay, I mean, if I'm being real, or it gets super uncomfortable for my belt digging into my belly. I'm being very vulnerable right here, I guess. And those are the times when I'm like, okay, I need to lose some weight. But then once that weight loss drops below that pain point, then it's easy for me to go back to some old habits, instead of saying, okay, I'm actually a skinny person now, or I'm a healthy weight person now, and I need to continue and sustain that mindset versus reverting back to where I was.
Yeah, that's interesting, because comfort and effort are not the same thing, right? Because what you're saying is, look, I've lost the weight, I'm in better shape, I've got these new eating habits, and there's no more difficult to eat this level than it is to eat at this level, but I'm less comfortable at this level. I'm more comfortable if I'm there. So we invest in our comfort rather than our health, right?
We invest in the comfort in the short term, where that slice of pizza is the comfort versus the, slim trim and able to, do more things, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. Because I've been in that same cycle. I found, though, Mike, my answer is just getting in slip-on, so you don't have to bend over the time. That's my recommendation.
Slip-ons.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I think, though, that this is a really good part of the conversation. It's all been good, but this is the part I want to kind of talk about. It's not as a contrarian, because it isn't contrarian, but it is a different way of thinking about the work. And I think rest run cycles are an interesting idea, because in anything, like if you run the marathon, the Boston Marathon, you don't go out and run the New York Marathon next week, and you don't go, you rest run, right? And that's a physical activity, and I get it, but you practice, and you stretch, and you exercise for the race. You peak just before the race, and so when you run the race, you're at your best and you give it your all. But at the end of that race, you need to recover and reset, because if you don't, you're going to burn out. You're going to hurt yourself, right? So that's a physical exertion. So it's not quite the same as a work. But in general, though, if you really crank at work so let's say for a 12-week year or for a 4-week cycle, execution cycle, and you crank, right, and you give it your all, and you're sacrificing time at home, you're sacrificing some of the things that you would otherwise do. Some of it's valuable, right? You're saying no to some things that might not be waste of time. They might be valuable, but in this season, you're going to say no to that stuff. And I think it's what research shows is that if you really, really stretch and work really, really hard, it's also good to have a time of assimilation. So you're learning new things, you're getting new results, and a lot of that's brute force stuff. But then you can start to systematize it, build systems around it, start to become more efficient, start saying no to the lower value activity and finding ways to get more of the right activity in place, right? So you start to think through, okay, what did I just do and how do I systematize it so that I can do this with less brute force, right? And there's this rest run process where you take a step back, you assimilate the changes, you figure out how to systematize all that stuff, and then you set another stretch goal. So I think sometimes, it's stretch, rest, stretch, rest, not go back. I mean, that's what you're saying is you could go back, right? And that's not what you want to do, but it's rest, stabilize, stretch, stabilize, stretch, stabilize. And that I think is a recipe for consistent growth. And also, there's important things in our lives that aren't business laden, right? That are families, our personal pursuits and things like that. All of that is what makes life great. And I think being really, how you do anything is how you do everything. So being really good and intentional at work, then that can translate to being really good and intentional in my personal life as well, in my endeavors outside of work. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's a balance in everything. And so, running hard and then consolidating, learning, establishing routines and processes to keep doing that with less effort and then move it to the next level is what I'm trying to say.
Or even having the reward. I mean, I love the concept of the 13th week.
Yeah.
Right. Just for that reason, like maybe the 13th week is I didn't quite do what I wanted to do, or I got some unfinished tactics that I got to clean up. Or maybe it's, hey, I did it. And Kristin, this is interesting to me. Like, let's say I did it and I was consistent with my tactics, might not have gotten the result I want. That's still something to celebrate, right? And using that 13th week to do that.
Absolutely, Mike. It's like the 80% in execution in the 12-week year, right? We're not looking for perfection. And we talked about that last week in our podcast. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist, and it can actually be detrimental thinking. So it is, even if you didn't hit the goal all the way, if you were close, it means you made massive effort in that 12 weeks prior. You thought differently, you acted differently, and that is absolutely celebratory worthy.
And we are just humming through these. Another great episode here. Good conversation. Anything you all want to add before we kind of wrap it up?
I want to leave with a challenging. Something occurred to me while we were talking. Michael was talking about the mindset or the comfort zone, and the we talked about stasis being it would almost keeps you from moving forward, and you're actually going backwards. But part of my job in working with clients is reframing things. So reframing discomfort so that it's got a positiveness to us. And you were talking about the rest run cycle, Michael. And what if we reframe stasis as that rest part, where we can be stasis for a week or a day or whatever it is? It allows us to catch our breath without going down and gives us a launching point and a big breath to go up to that next step. So even reframing stasis in this whole conversation as a positive, I think might be beneficial as well.
Yeah. It's like that. You got a plan, you execute the plan, and then after you've done, you do an after action review. And that after action review is a period of rest and reflection, but you're learning about what happened and you change some things. And then the next time you do it, you're better at it. Right. So that's that continuous growth, but it includes all three of those: that planning, execution, and reflection.
So we're having all these topics right now that I think are just specifically designed to hit me where I need it. So this was a great one on comfort is not success. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about planning is not execution. Kristin will tell you that if it was just planning, I would be so rich right now. It'd be unbelievable. So
not only would you have a villa in Italy, you would own the country.
I might own Italy. Yeah. So the planning is not the problem for me, but planning does not equal execution. And we'll get into and we have the two best experts in the world. I think on those two things, on planning and execution, how they work together. It should be an amazing episode. We'll be back live. If you have questions, you can join our audience on the YouTube channel. It's probably the best way to get here. So it will be in the link will be in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. So every Friday, 1:00 Eastern, we're live right here. So thank you again for listening. And we look forward to seeing you next time on The Struggle Is Not Real. Take care, everybody.